Hello, my name is Yvonne Medina. I'm an English teacher at San Francisco School, and I'm going to tell you about my experience while applying multiple intelligence theory, brain-based learning, and meaningful learning in one of my classes. But at first, I'll give you some information about the context of my class. The pedagogical model we apply is Teaching for Understanding. That is a project-based model. It has 3 moments that I will explain later. The class I take as an example was made for 9th graders, and our final year project is about discovering different places in our students' countries, since we have Colombian and Venezuelan students. In this part of the project, they had to prepare some important information about the place they chose. It was the location of that place, characteristics of the landscape, what humans had done there in terms of construction, technology and pollution, main characteristics of people at that place, behavior rules, traditions, and of course, traditional dishes. Then, at first, let's take a look on the activities of the class, and later come to explore how multiple intelligences, meaningful learning, and brain-based learning were applied in these activities. Let's start with the class. First, activities in the class. In this point, we needed to learn about food and cooking to rewrite the recipe of that traditional dish, and that's why that topic is the center of this class. At the beginning, after telling the comprehension goals and the comprehension performances, we did the previous exploration phase, in which students had to recover the previous information they had about food and the way to measure it. Then they had to create this vocabulary list with the meaning of all these words. Some of them are very common, such as apple and orange, and some other are true cognates. They answered this part working with their classmates, sharing or negotiating the words they knew for others that they didn't know. Then they tried to count how many of how much of different kinds of food they have every week. That is not too easy activity when you are so young. This part was mainly individual, having in mind individual and family preferences and possibilities. After that, in the guided inquiry, they had to compare false cognates in Spanish and English with the picture and even the sounds. Later, they completed these word family trees with compound words, which also were focused on the function and the form of these words. Next, they tried to organize the food in countable and uncountable groups, and later we corrected together in a reflection and analysis exercise. At the end, they have the application moment, when they had to complement what they were doing with extra vocabulary about cooking verbs and use all this information to rewrite a recipe of a traditional food from the place they chose. I forgot to tell you that the place couldn't be Bogota, but place the students were born, or the parents or the grandparents or a relative, or even a place they had visited, or someone else in their families, or where they want to go in a holiday time, but it must be in their countries. Now, how did I take into account each one of multiple intelligences? Let's see each one of them. First, musical intelligence was applied when I asked the students to compare the pronunciation of some specific words, such as desert and dessert, as true and false cognates of desierto, or the differences and similarities between chocolate and chocolate, focusing on P and T sounds in pasta as an example, and even correcting the pronunciation of pizza and lasagna. Bodily kinesthetic intelligence was useful when talking about experiences with food that are mediated by senses. Visual spatial was a great help when relating false cognates with the real pictures and while organizing words in family trees. It was also linked with the form of the food, and it's linked to naturalistic intelligence too, having in mind with them that food comes from alive beings such as plants and animals and their parts. Logical and mathematical intelligence was promoted when we tried to count countable and uncountable food, and later we recovered information from a previous exercise about measures in English and complemented it for listing the ingredients for the recipe. Verbal linguistics is along all the class, but especially when we talk about sentence structures. That was the moment when we remembered imperative tense that we had worked on some weeks ago. When remembering experiences and sensations, we linked the class with interpersonal intelligence, and sharing the info with the classmates and negotiating the words' meanings were connected to interpersonal intelligence. It is interesting when looking at it, so disconnected one situation with the other, but let's look how it helped to the meaningful learning. Remember each one of the meaningful learning characteristics applied in this class. First, it is active, for example, when students have to identify the meaning of true cognates, false cognates, and compound words. Second, it is collaborative, for example, when they help each other in the construction of the vocabulary lists. Third, it was authentic, since many traditional dishes recipes are not in English, so the students had to use what they had to rewrite it, and it was particularly meaningful because names of the dishes do not change, as tamal or ajiaco. They found differences in the names of the ingredients as culantro and cilantro, and even noticed that cilantro in American English is named coriander in British English, and following the stylistic recommendation of avoiding write both words in the same text. And some of the ingredients had special ways to be translated, such as the anato oil, known in Spanish as aceite anatado or aceite de achiote. Fourth characteristic of meaningful learning, it was constructive, since students had to link previous knowledge to learn the new knowledge and practice all together. And finally, it was goal-directed due to the final and main part of the class, that was the rewriting of the recipe in English. Before finishing this video, I want to remind you how my class included brain-based principles. We see active engagement equals active brains when the students had to move around the classroom and ask their classmates and teacher about the new vocabulary and practice the pronunciation of those words. This activity connected to the experiences when tasting and eating the food is applied in neurons that wire together principle. The use of words, family trees, and pictures and the true cognates list are linked to vision trumps all other senses. Social learning via mirror neurons is present in different moments. For example, when sharing and negotiating meanings of words, practicing the pronunciation all together, discussing about which foods are countable or uncountable, and correcting it at the end. Especially this checking of the answers and having the possibility of correcting it, plus the rewriting of the recipe in English, are connected to no pain, no gain principle. And finally, the use of all these vocabulary and grammar structures on writing the recipe is also a way of practice makes perfect. This way, I tried this class was effectively meaningful for my 9th graders, hoping they can not only talk about food, but also sharing with other people the knowledge about the places of Colombia and Venezuela they want to show. Thank you for watching. See you later.